Are you ready to live your dream? Motivation, inspiration, and passion. That's what it takes to make dreams come true. Welcome to the Nadia Sahari Show. Our guests will share important tips, insights, and knowledge to help you fulfill your dreams of success. Here's your host, actress, author, entrepreneur, Nadia Sahari.
Hello, everyone. This is Nadia Sahari, your host with the Nadia Sahari Show. How's everyone doing out there? Hope you're doing well. It's a beautiful sunny day in Texas. That's where I am right now. I go back and forth to different places. And now I'm in Texas. And it is beautiful. Well, we have an exciting guest as usual. All my guests are exciting. And my show is about motivation and inspiration. And we learn a lot from everyone. So I hope that you listen clearly here because we have dreams. We have dreams. We do have dreams of writing a book, acting in a movie, getting a record label, or to have our own business. That's why I invite my guests, or they ask and request to join my show. And they are so thrilled to share their secrets with you, their journey and their challenges, how they did it, what they're doing to maintain that success. Today's guest is incredible. He is an author who grew up in the rural Ozarks, and he began fiction writing later in life. And it was just so cute. He has animals in his house, and he said he had to go somewhere quiet. And he said, especially because of his bird. And I said, that's hilarious. Your bird stays in the house and you have to go in the garage. And I thought that was so cool. So I would love to introduce to you Karlyle Tomms. Welcome to the Nadia Sahari Show, Karlyle.
Well, thank you for the welcome. I'm sitting here in my car in the garage. It's the only quiet place I can find around my place.
So tell me what animals you have. We know you have a bird and cats.
I have a bird and I have 6 cats, yes.
Well, I had cats in my backyard, about 14 of them, and 4 in the house. Now I have none.
Yeah, there are a few strays that come as well. And by the way, I'm also in Texas. What part of Texas are you in?
Austin right now.
Austin. Okay, well, you're not that far from me. I moved to Texas from Missouri back in 2015. So I grew up in the Ozarks, lived there my whole life, and I just got to the point, I developed neuropathy in my hands and feet and just got to the point that I could not deal with the cold weather. So yes. I came south. I'm a winter Texan all year round.
Oh, I love the weather in Texas. I can't handle cold weather and snow. I lived in Michigan and had all that, and I'm glad to be in Texas. I go to California as well and spend part-time there as well. But let's talk about...
Well, I do too. I have family in California.
Oh, you do? Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about you, Karlyle.
Okay.
So you began fiction writing later in life, and you've written for different magazines and newspapers over the years. And let me ask you, at what age did you get inspiration to be a writer?
Well, I think that goes way back into my childhood. I wrote a book when I was a little kid. I didn't write a book. I wrote a play when I was a little kid called Who Ate the Tree? And that was my first venture into writing. I don't know whatever happened to it. I don't remember the plot line or anything about it, but I managed to churn that out when, I don't know, I was probably 12, 14 years old, maybe. But my father, he narrated a book, and this is a long story. My mother and my father were separated. I was a hillbilly half-breed. My mother's from northern Arkansas, and my father's from southern California. My mother had separated from him, came back to Arkansas, and then she ended up being killed just as I was turning 5 years old.
Oh.
And so my grandparents took me in. They raised me, and I was not allowed to try to contact my father. And apparently my mother had said, don't come near me again. And the only thing that I had was a copy of his book that he had autographed to my mom. And my father was a prisoner of war in Japan during World War II. He was captured in Guam a few days after Pearl Harbor and spent the duration of the war in Japanese POW camps. Then afterward, he narrated this book, and then the book was published in 1954. So when I turned 18, I was able to contact my father by writing the publishing company of his book. And they sent me a letter back saying they don't reveal addresses of their authors, but what they did was they forwarded my letter to my dad, and my dad contacted me, and I met him for the first time at the age of 18. So I think maybe knowing the fact that he had a book might have inspired me to be a writer, or maybe it's genetic. I don't know.
Well, probably it was the inspiration, and maybe both. Maybe both.
Maybe both.
Maybe
yes.
both. Yeah, a little bit of everything. Wow, that's incredible. Well, and you do speaking tours. You're a professional, and you do professional and non-professional events. And
yes.
Now, your first novel was Confessions from the Pumpkin Patch, and you won the 2016 New Apple Awards medal for general fiction, and you were endorsed by Meredith Sisko, who is known for her work on Winter's Bone, starring Jennifer Lawrence. Interesting. And a film which was nominated for 4 Academy Awards and won the 2010 Sundance Film Festival Grand Jury Prize. So tell us about that.
Well, that film actually was filmed in southern Missouri, and it was written by a man, Daniel Woodrell, who the book was written. It was based on a novel written by Daniel Woodrell, who actually lived in the same town where I lived. And so the way that first book came about, I did not set out to write a novel. I was just joking around with friends, playing this character of this burned out old hippie woman. And then I thought, wonder what would happen if I just sat down and see what she has to say. And so I started writing first person perspective as though she was telling the story. And it turned out that she had a whole lot to say, and it just kind of didn't stop. And I went back to it. I did quit for about a year, and then went back to it. She backed up a couple of pages, started again, and finished the book. So then when I finished it, I had friends who had retired there from New York. Sue was a friend of mine, her husband, Frank. They were both friends. Frank, at the time, had developed dementia. He was a retired author. He has like 15 books in publication. And Sue had worked with him all those years, and she agreed to read the book. I thought, well, I'll just run it by her and see what she thinks. And she came back and she said, this is good stuff. I want you to publish this. So I then, when I got around to connecting with a publisher and possibly getting that book published, I contacted Meredith Sisko, who was teaching at the university there and had been involved with that film. When they filmed it there, she had been picked up by the director, Deborah Granick, who directed that film. And to do the soundtrack, Meredith has done folk music for many, many, many years. So she'd been picked up to do the soundtrack for that movie. And I got that to her. She was teaching writing, actually, at the Missouri. Oh, gosh, they changed the name of it, University of Southern Missouri. And so I don't know if that's the correct name of the university because I forget. But anyway, she read it. And she came back and gave me this wonderful endorsement as well. So that book was just kind of serendipitous how it just kind of flowed into place.
Isn't that something? You just never know. You never know. And
yeah. Well, the second book was not so serendipitous. I fought to get that one.
Well,
I had to work at that one.
Oh, well, that's the way it goes. A little bit of this and a little bit of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can't all be the same. Life changes. But
right.
Yes. So you wrote your second novel, but let me go back to the fiction book that we were just talking about, Pumpkin Patch. So you wrote that. It's a fiction, but you wrote it in first person as a narrator, having the character be the narrator?
Yes.
That's what I thought
That's
you
the
said.
way I write all.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I write all my books that way. The second book is a male protagonist.
Uh-huh.
And the third book that I'm currently writing actually has a transgender protagonist.
Uh-huh.
And so these characters just kind of show up in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And when they show up, they sort of pester me to write the story.
Well, your second novel is The Calling Dream, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Well, that has a lot to do with the way that I grew up, because I grew up, of course, in the Ozarks on a farm in northern Arkansas, and a lot of the scenery and information that's in that book about the protagonist's upbringing is just basically is descriptions of things that I experienced when I was a child.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of, most of it's fiction. I didn't write my own story at all, but I used my experience as a child and my visions of the farm that I grew up on, the barn, and various different things that were around the farm to wrap the fiction around that.
I was going to say that your calling dream was also inspired by the way you grew up, of course, and and you attended a rigid and fundamentalist church, and you had your own struggles between spirituality and sexuality. So talk to us about that. Exactly what were you struggling with?
Well, I was struggling with the fact that I was gay in the 1960s in rural Arkansas in a fundamentalist church.
Uh-huh.
And the protagonist of my book he's a heterosexual.
Uh-huh.
But that was my own struggle. I've written a poetry book called The Gulls Are Always Laughing.
Uh-huh.
And that book has many, many, many poems in it that are from my own personal experience and going through those struggles. There are two poems in that book about my cousin who was lesbian and in 1982 committed suicide. And so there are two poems about that. In those days, there were things that were just not as accepted as they are today.
Right.
We've come a long way, but
Right.
there's a lot more to overcome. So what I got through with that was that my grandmother inspired me. My grandmother was there for me. She was someone that I knew loved me no matter what.
Yes.
Always. And so I managed to deal with that conflict, but I struggled for years and years and years after that, and I studied all kinds of things in terms of spirituality.
Yes.
I was told, I went to a Presbyterian college, right? And I was told that I was going to go to hell for going to a Presbyterian college. And that Presbyterian college is the best thing that ever happened to me, because I was still, with the fundamentalist religion, it was that I was not supposed to question. I was supposed to just accept it. This is the rule. This is God's word. You don't question it. You just accept it. So at that school, there was a Presbyterian preministerial student there, and one day I was spouting off about something being a sin, and he said, "Why do you believe that?" And I said, "Because it's in the Bible." And he says, "Where is it in the Bible?" "Oh, well, it's in blank passage." He says, "How do you know that's what that passage means?" I said, "Because the preacher says so." He said, "How do you know the preacher is right?" I said, "Because he's ordained by God." He said, "How do you know that he's ordained by God?" Now, he kept asking me these questions, and what was happening inside of me is that I was getting furiously angry because I couldn't answer the questions.
Right.
But the message to me was think. Don't just accept, think. And the ones who demand that you are not allowed to question are the very ones who need to be questioned the most.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I studied many things. I studied Christianity, continued to study Christianity, but I studied other versions of Christianity. I studied Buddhism. I looked at Wiccan religion. I looked at the ancient Judean
Mm-hmm.
texts, the Kabbalah, and those kinds of things. And over time, I realized that God's not a theater critic. God's not sitting up in heaven saying, those Pentecostals put on a really good show, but the Catholics sure are boring.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, I just don't think it works that way.
I don't think so.
Going to that Presbyterian college gave me permission to think.
Mm-hmm.
And it also gave me the education that I needed to do what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to write and to have these awarenesses of personalities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my major at the time was behavioral science. So I have these awarenesses of people and personalities and how those kinds of things work.
Well, the funny thing is that if you have surrendered your heart to Jesus and believe that he died on a cross and was resurrected for you, for your sins, and ask forgiveness, he forgives. And
Yes.
his word, the Bible, is his daily word for us to live by. And he wants us to trust him. And he loves us. That's why he died on the cross. That's why he was resurrected. And his Bible is his way of communicating to us, to give us guidance and to help us to have faith, to trust him, and pray and ask him for what we need or want in our lives. And he, if it's good, he'll open the door if it's a good thing for us. If it's not,
Yes.
we are not going to get it. And
Right.
so if you look at that, if you study the word of God in the Bible, God will speak to you. He will speak to you, and he will give you the direction. He will give you the peace in your heart, and you'll know when you have that peace that that's what you should do.
Yes.
And that's the right thing to do. And you don't need any man to tell you how to live your life. God is the one that you should follow.
I came to the awareness also that, you know, that God's not a theater critic. I stepped out of church one day and had that awareness.
Yes.
But that Christianity can be summed up by what Jesus said from the cross.
Yes.
Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do.
Yes.
And there are three basic implications of that. The first implication is that Jesus had so much love he could forgive his murderers even as they were murdering him.
That's right.
The second implication of that is that they were not murdering him because they were evil.
Yes.
They were murdering him because they were ignorant. They
Yes.
didn't get it. And if they truly understood love,
Yes.
they could not behave that way.
That's right. And you cannot, and I say this all the time, you have no love for yourself. If you don't love God, you can't love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you can't love anyone else.
Right.
And that's it in a nutshell. So you must love God to learn how to love. I know that so much more than I can tell you, because I came from a very abusive childhood and adult life most of my years. And I've been through all the abuses under the sun. You name it, I've been through it. And I'll tell you, if it were not for my faith and my trust in Lord Jesus Christ, I would be dead today. I would be in prison. I would be a prostitute. I would be so filled with hate, and I'd be dead. But he put love in my heart for everybody, and he put forgiveness in my heart for everybody. So I'm happy.
Yes. Well, I think that's one of the things that I want to do with my work is to inspire.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people who become successful and a lot of people who reach that point of inspiring others
Mm-hmm.
have overcome They've
Yes.
been through the fire,
Yes.
and the pottery hardens in the fire.
Yes.
And so the people who have been through terrible things, then it's going to or it's going to make you.
Well,
And what I want to do is to teach people that it can make you. You can be better. You can overcome. That the characters in my books do that.
Yes.
They overcome.
Yes. Yes. We are not survivors. We are thrivers.
Right.
Yes. I'm writing another book as well. I have, I am too. And yes, absolutely. I so agree with what you're saying. And I think it's marvelous. And it's like people like you and me who have been through things in our lives as children or adults or both. We get to that point in our lives where we've been through it. And we know that other people are walking in the same shoes but need help. And that's why we went through it, so we can help them, so we can guide them, so we can inspire them. Because if we didn't go through it, what could we do? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to go through those things in life for a reason.
Another thing that I've said is that who better to lead you out of hell than one who has been there?
Exactly. Someone who has not been through anything in their lives or has not experienced any abuse of any kind, how can they tell you what is best to do, or how can they inspire you? How can they don't know what it feels like. They haven't been in those shoes. They haven't gone through that experience.
Right.
It's like you telling me, I had a chocolate ice cream cone today, and if I didn't have an ice cream chocolate cone in my life, I wouldn't know what you're talking about.
How do you explain the taste of chocolate
to one
who's never seen it? Yes.
Yeah, or never tasted it. How do you do that?
Right.
You can't. So I don't know what you're saying. I can't relate.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting. Very interesting. I like it. So your books are about people in recovery, abuse survivors, trauma survivors, and people who have been exploited and mistreated, cast aside. Yeah. And a lot of it has your life story in it, but through other characters.
Right.
Cool.
Right. Now, one thing that I can tell you is that my books are very graphic. Uh-huh. And they're not necessarily nice books. One person who reviewed my first book accused me of contributing to the degradation of society. But the life doesn't hold back.
Yes.
So I don't hold back in my writing.
I see. You're right. Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be right back, Karlyle. Don't go away.
All right.
Check out the all-new Nadia Sahari Show. It's today's hottest new talk show and rated 5 stars on iTunes, featuring amazing guests and inspiring stories of today. All genres, all dreams, no limits. Visit thenadiasaharishow.com and get the app for Apple and Android. Easy streaming and listening. Have a business? Why not become a sponsor of the show and take your brand to the next level? Email us at info@thenadiasaharishow.com for our complete sponsor and advertising package deals. Let the show inspire you, motivate you, and educate you to your dream and to your success. Only on and always on the Nadia Sahari Show, the place where dreams really do come true.
And we're back with Karlyle Tomms, author. Interesting conversation. I hope you're enjoying it. And he is very interesting, and he has some good things to say. He's got new books coming on. He's writing new books. And let's talk about it again, Karlyle. So you were going to say before the break.
Well, it's not really, my story is more in the poetry book than it is in the novels. The novels are very different from my own story.
Okay.
The first novel, Confessions from the Pumpkin Patch, is about the protagonist growing up and maturing in the 1960s, has an alcoholic father and a controlling mother.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother tries to control every move that she makes, and she just becomes extremely rebellious.
Mm.
And she just thinks she knows it all. Mama knows nothing. And she goes away to college, and she meets this guy who's actually kind of an ugly hippie. And she begins to discover that there's a lot more to the world than there was in her little Pennsylvania hometown. And she begins, for instance, he presents as this hippie, and then he takes her to a Ferrari. He's actually from a very wealthy family, but he and his father are in great disagreement on the politics of the times.
Mm-hmm.
So he's anti-war, pro-hippie movement, etc. There's a scene where he convinces Lavella, who's the protagonist of that first novel, to go to a Martin Luther rally. Mm. And his father happens to see them in the background on a newsreel, and comes down and disowns him. And from there, he says, let's go. And they take whatever money they've got left, and they take off for the Summer of Love in San Francisco in 1967. So that book's about her discovering things about her family that she never knew. There were secrets that her mother and her father had that she didn't know about. And that book is also about dealing with racism. And she has to she meets a challenge in which she has to face the fact that she has racism that she's not acknowledged. And so the second book is the son of a backwoods preacher. The protagonist, Ronald Dennison, is the son of a backwoods preacher growing up in Arkansas in the 1940s. And he grows up and becomes a televangelist, but he begins to have these dreams when he's about 10 years old, this strange redheaded woman, and he has various different dreams with her. There are dreams, she's a seductress, and sometimes she's a monster. And so he continues to have these dreams, and he gets into the position of being a well-known televangelist and having this following in the church and following on television, known all across the country. But he has an addiction to acting out sexually, and he seduces women, he cheats on his wife, he does all of these horrible, horrible things and hates himself for it, hates himself, and his dreams berate him for that. But the redheaded woman in his dreams is keeping a secret that even he doesn't know.
Let me ask you, where do you get all these ideas for your books?
You know, the first one, like I said, I was just joking around.
I know that one.
And, you know, I was just joking around with a friend, and I thought, well, what will happen if I let her write and let her tell her story? And she did.
Right.
And
like
so
this one.
it
How
almost
did you get
feels
this
like,
one?
well, each novel, the protagonist of the next novel is introduced in the previous novel.
Okay.
So Lavella, who is in the first novel, is one of the conquests of the sexually addicted televangelist.
I see.
Who then becomes the protagonist of the second novel. So each novel introduces the person who will tell their story the next time.
So do you have cliffhangers after each novel, at the end of each novel, so people have to buy the next book? No?
No, each one stands alone. Each one's a separate story. It stands alone, but it's called the Soul Encounter series.
Okay.
Because they have a soul encounter. A soul encounter is when you run into somebody, and it might be that you have some kind of interaction with them at a party, or you might have a brief interaction with them, like in the first novel, Lavella has a tryst with the preacher. And what a soul encounter does, it's like your soul's encounter, and it shifts the direction of your life.
Yes.
For both characters.
Yes.
And so you don't know the preacher's side of the story until you read the second novel.
I see. Okay.
So Lavella tells her side of the story, and then when he tells his story, he tells his side of the story.
Got it. All right. Okay. Well, let's talk about how people can buy your books, where can they buy them, and how can they contact you? What is your social media?
Well, all of the books are available on Amazon. The second book is published by Page Publishing, and Page has that in distribution through Ingram, and so it's available pretty much everywhere, Barnes & Noble. If you go to your local bookstore, if they don't have it, you can ask for it. And if you do ask for it, hopefully they'll get the idea maybe we should stock this and other people could discover it.
Yes.
So that second book's available everywhere, but all of the books are available on Amazon.
Okay.
And the way that you connect with me, I've got Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr. All of those links are on my website. So if you go to KarlyleTomms.com, KarlyleTomms.com, and there are buttons down at the bottom where you can click on that button and it will take you directly to my social media sites.
Cool. You're as bad as I am about social media. I'm everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to be. Okay.
I probably pay attention to Instagram more than any other because I do get up every morning and write a little mini blog on Instagram.
Yes.
But I have multiple Twitter followers, over 9,000 Twitter followers, and at this point about 10,000 on LinkedIn.
Good.
And so, it's building.
Yes.
That the following is building and connections are building, and I think that's wonderful. I want to be able to reach people.
That's right. That's what it's about, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, I thank you so much. It's been interesting, and I thank you for being on the show and for sharing and giving us inspiration and education, because we learn something from everybody, because we don't know it all, do we?
No, we don't.
No.
And thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Had a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
You too.
I want to thank my guest, Karlyle Tomms, for being on my show. What an interesting conversation. And his books. It's incredible, isn't it? And it's wonderful that he wants to inspire everyone. And I want you to remember to always live your dream. Do not give up. Never give up. Your day will come. Passion. Keep the passion going. Do not let it die. Do not fall down. And if you do, stand up and do it again. Are you living your dream?
Thanks for tuning in with Nadia and her guests. For more info, episodes, and connection, please visit our website, thenadiasaharishow.com. Share episodes with your friends. Follow us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Instagram, and most importantly, never give up. Live your dream.
Latin Connection magazine is a family magazine featuring people of influence, cultural events, and traditions, recipes and photos of Latin food, Hispanics in business. Plus, get news on Latin festivals, Latin entertainment, and Latinos in the fashion industry, and see photos of Latinos in action all over the U.S. Conoce tu vecino y mucho más. We invite you to share your special event with us at LatinConnectionMag.com. Latin Connection Magazine. Conexión Latina y mucho más. Latin Connection Magazine. It's for anyone and everyone to enjoy, no matter who you are.